So welcome to the next Opening the Bin vodcast. I'm joined by Manisha Anantharaman, who is one of our keynote speakers at the next Opening the Bin 3 conference in Lancaster on the 15th to the 17th of June later this year, where we'll be talking about waste, economy, culture and society, one world, one bin. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. Manisha is an Associate Professor of Justice, Community and Leadership at St. Mary's College of California. And my name is Lucy Wishart. And we've got a couple of questions for Manisha. That your work centres on critically exploring practices of environmentalism and sustainability across multiple scales and locations, including the circular economy. And you've written about how sustainable practices can be tools for domination and for liberation. What does this mean in the context of the circular economy, and particularly in the Global South, where the focus of your most recent edited collection?
Yeah, thank you so much for this question. So I think to start, maybe just to take a step back, as Max Lebron explains in their really important and essential text, Pollution is Colonialism, current systems of waste disposal rely on the appropriation of land and maintain colonial relations. In my work and in the work of several other scholars who study waste labor, we also find that these systems of disposal in the linear economy are fundamentally dependent on poorly compensated, dehumanized labor across the world. You know, sometimes you hear this argument that it's the cheap labor in South and Southeast Asia that attracts the world's trash, and that's why much of the world's plastics end up there. I would argue for a reframe. This labor and those lives, I think, are deliberately cheapened so they can function as a buffer or sink for global refuse. So if we take this context, I think if efforts at changing these unsustainable practices through circular economy solutions do not consider the colonial, hierarchical, racialized social relations that underpin our current systems of production, consumption, and disposal, they are bound to reproduce them. Let's take a concrete example. Attempts to set up recycling infrastructures in global South cities often ignore or undermine pre-existing value chains of resource recovery that exist in the informal sector. Instead, often municipal governments set up parallel systems of recycling and resource recovery, inviting new private companies to come in and take over functions that were previously in informal economies or community economies. And sometimes even when municipal governments or environmental activists recognize and value the contributions of the informal sector and try to integrate them into these resource recovery systems, the terms of integration are not always beneficial and can even worsen the lives of informal workers by reducing their autonomy or deteriorating working conditions. But in the circular economy, these tensions are often glossed over, and there's a tendency to present the circular economy as a win-win-win between social, economic, and environmental goals. And I think that this win-win-win frame is actually a fallacy and hides some of the trade-offs and tensions that are inevitable when you're trying to fix a system that is fundamentally unjust. So ultimately, I think when circular economy solutions are designed without input and full participation from the individuals and communities who are both already doing this work and might be harmed by circular economy policies, they end up both with a false diagnosis of the problem as well as false solutions. And when I mean full participation, I don't mean just inclusion as workers or as implementers, but rather participation in both knowledge production and decision making around the circular economy.
And in some of your work, you've called for a reclaiming of the circular economy, which you've started to speak about a little bit already. Can you expand a little bit more on that? And what can waste scholars do to support that ambition?
Yeah. You know, if we acknowledge the fact that current modes of production, consumption, and disposal are unsustainable from an environmental point of view and unjust from a social point of view, we recognize a need to remake our economic system. And I think here the circular economy and some aspects of circular economy thinking, particularly its emphasis on extending the use value of goods and services, is a good corrective to current patterns of production and consumption that work around ideas of planned obsolescence or entrenched disposability in the economy. And I think the circular economy can especially be powerful when it's combined with a model of development that focuses on needs and need satisfaction as opposed to ever escalating consumption as the goal of economic activity. But for the circular economy to not just become, the latest profit or growth frontier, it has to redistribute value towards those actors who are currently exploited in linear economies, be it workers in garment factories or informal waste pickers. And to do this, it has to fundamentally confront those practices of accumulation and colonization that are fundamental to the ways in which our current economic system functions. So I think for scholars like us, I think this means studying the circular economy critically and putting life, whether that is the life of workers, the life of people who are consuming, the life of people who are working with waste, as well as more than human life, at the center of our inquiry. And this can be done by bringing a critical intersectional lens to scholarship on the circular economy, where we consider how gender, race, caste, class, and questions of justice come together in vis-a-vis how both current systems as well as solutions impact different groups. I think it also behooves us as scholars to listen to frontline communities and their critiques of both current systems of disposability as well as new plans and proposals, and co-imagine alternate possibilities. I think this is especially important right now with the circular economy because this is by and large a top-down corporate-led discourse. And to reclaim it, we will need a broad movement of scholars, activists, practitioners, and frontline communities. And as a first step, I think we have to think about how we can redistribute power towards grassroots and frontline communities. So they are the ones who are kind of both leading the knowledge production around how to unmake and remake our linear economies, as well as fully participating in all the stakeholder forums, all the way from the international level to the most local level in the decision making that is taking place around this process.
Thank you so much, Manisha, for giving us your time. We look forward to seeing you later in the year.
Yeah, this has been great. I look forward to it myself.